Who are we really? A simple question yet profound. Since time immemorial, humans have grappled with the concept of identity. It's the invisible thread that connects us to the tapestry of humanity. In societies large and small, knowing who's who has always been paramount. This is where the story of identification cards begins. Imagine a world without names, faces, or any way to distinguish one person from another. Chaos would reign, trade would falter, trust would crumble. Identification, in its many forms, is the bedrock of civilization. It provides order, fosters commerce, and underpins our social interactions. From the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia to the biometric passports of today, the methods we use to verify identity have evolved dramatically. Yet, the fundamental need to prove who we are has remained constant. Join me on a journey through time as we explore the fascinating history of identification cards and their impact on our world. This is the story of how we came to carry a piece of our identity in our wallets and on our phones. It's a story of innovation, driven by the need for security, accountability, and the very essence of what it means to be human. The desire to mark our existence is as old as humanity itself, a fundamental aspect of our nature. Long before the advent of writing, early humans used cave paintings and rudimentary tools to leave their mark on the world, creating a visual record of their lives and surroundings. These acts, in a sense, were early forms of identification, a way of saying, I was here, and this is my story. In ancient civilizations, the need for more sophisticated forms of identification arose alongside the development of complex societies, trade, and governance. In Mesopotamia, around 3000 BC, cylinder seals emerged as a way to authenticate documents and transactions, ensuring the legitimacy of agreements. These small, intricately carved cylinders, often made of stone, were rolled onto wet clay to leave a unique impression, serving as a personal signature. The Egyptians, masters of record-keeping and administration, developed their own system of identification using papyrus scrolls, which were durable and portable. These scrolls contained personal information, such as names, occupations, and family lineages, meticulously recorded in hieroglyphics. They served as early forms of identification documents, particularly for officials and scribes, who needed to verify their identity and authority. In ancient China, seals made of bronze, jade, or ivory were used to signify identity and authority, reflecting the importance of social status and hierarchy. These seals, known as chops, were pressed onto ink pads and then stamped onto documents, leaving a distinct and recognizable mark. The unique imprint of each chop served as a personal signature and a symbol of status, ensuring the authenticity of the document. These early forms of identification, though rudimentary by today's standards, highlight the enduring human need to establish identity and authenticate transactions, a practice that has evolved over millennia. They laid the groundwork for the development of more sophisticated identification systems in the centuries to come, paving the way for the complex and secure methods we use today. The Middle Ages witnessed a resurgence of trade and commerce, particularly in Europe. This period saw towns and cities bustling with activity, as merchants and traders from various regions converged to exchange goods and services. With this resurgence came a growing need for reliable ways to verify the identity and qualifications of merchants, artisans, and travelers. As trade routes expanded and more people moved across regions, the demand for trustworthy credentials became increasingly important. Guilds, powerful associations that controlled specific trades, played a crucial role in this evolution. These guilds not only regulated the quality of goods and services, but also ensured that their members adhered to strict standards of craftsmanship and ethical conduct. Medieval guilds issued certificates to their members, attesting to their skills and good standing. These documents were often adorned with intricate designs and official seals, making them difficult to forge and adding an extra layer of security. These certificates, often written on parchment or paper, served as early forms of professional licenses. They were essential for craftsmen who needed to prove their expertise and gain the trust of potential clients and employers. They allowed skilled craftsmen to move from town to town, seeking work and recognition for their expertise. This mobility was crucial in a time when local economies were growing and the demand for skilled labor was on the rise. Pilgrims journeying to holy sites also relied on documents to prove their identity and purpose. These journeys were often long and arduous, and having the proper credentials could mean the difference between safe passage and peril. These documents, known as pilgrim badges or letters of safe conduct, granted them safe passage and access to religious shrines. They were issued by religious authorities and were recognized across different regions, providing a form of protection for the travelers. They often featured religious imagery and were worn visibly as a sign of devotion. These badges not only served as proof of pilgrimage, but also as cherished keepsakes that pilgrims could take back home. The use of paper, a Chinese invention that spread to Europe in the 12th century, revolutionized record-keeping and identification. Paper was more versatile and easier to produce than parchment, which had been the primary medium for writing. Paper was cheaper and more readily available than parchment, making it possible to create and distribute documents on a larger scale. This accessibility allowed for more widespread documentation and record-keeping, which was essential for the growing bureaucratic needs of the time. This paved the way for the development of more widespread identification systems in the centuries to come. The ability to produce documents efficiently and in large quantities was a significant step forward in the evolution of identification practices. The medieval period, though often associated with darkness and decline, saw significant advancements in identification practices. The innovations in papermaking and the establishment of guilds contributed to a more organized and reliable system of credentials. The rise of guilds, the use of paper credentials, and the need for safe passage documents all contributed to the development of more formalized and widely accepted forms of identification. These early systems laid the groundwork for the complex identification methods we use today. Section 4. The Dawn of Modern Identification. Photography's Impact. The 19th century witnessed a technological marvel that would revolutionize identification photography. Invented in 1826, photography quickly captured the world's imagination and offered a new way to capture and reproduce images. Its potential for identification was immediately recognized. Early photographic portraits, though cumbersome and expensive, provided a more accurate and tamper-proof way to record a person's likeness. Police departments, eager to identify criminals, were among the first to adopt photography for identification purposes. The use of mugshots, standardized photographs of criminals, became increasingly common in the late 19th century. Beyond law enforcement, photography found its way into various forms of identification. Passports, which had existed for centuries as handwritten documents, began to incorporate photographs in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This innovation helped to curb forgery and improve the reliability of international travel documents. The introduction of photographic identification marked a significant milestone in the history of identification. It provided a more accurate, objective, and difficult-to-forge method of verifying identity, paving the way for the development of modern identification cards as we know them today. Section 5. The 20th Century Standardization and Government-Issued IDs. The 20th century witnessed a dramatic expansion of government power and bureaucracy, which fundamentally changed the way societies were organized and governed. With this expansion came a growing need for standardized and universally recognized forms of identification, ensuring that individuals could be reliably identified across various government and private sector interactions. Governments around the world began issuing national identity cards to their citizens, often linking these cards to social welfare programs, voting rights, and other essential services. These cards became a crucial part of daily life, embedding themselves into the fabric of society. World War I, with its massive troop movements and heightened security concerns, further accelerated the adoption of national identification systems. The war created an urgent need for efficient and reliable identification methods. Governments needed a reliable way to track soldiers, manage resources, and prevent espionage. The ability to quickly and accurately identify individuals became a matter of national security. National identity cards, often accompanied by photographs and personal information, became indispensable tools in the war effort. These cards helped ensure that soldiers were properly accounted for, and that military operations ran smoothly. In the aftermath of the war, national identification systems remained in place in many countries. They evolved to serve a wider range of purposes, becoming integral to the administration of various government functions. They evolved to serve a wider range of purposes, including tracking employment, administering social security programs, and verifying age for purposes such as purchasing alcohol or tobacco. These systems provided a foundation for modern administrative practices. The 20th century also saw the rise of driver's licenses as a ubiquitous form of identification. As the automobile became a symbol of modernity, the need for regulation and safety became paramount. As automobiles became more common, governments sought ways to regulate drivers and improve road safety. Driver's licenses were introduced to ensure that only competent individuals were allowed to operate vehicles. Driver's licenses, initially intended to certify driving competency, quickly evolved into de facto national identification cards in many countries. They became essential for various aspects of daily life, from opening bank accounts to boarding planes. Section 6. From paper to plastic. The evolution of ID card materials. The materials used to create identification cards have also undergone a fascinating evolution. Early identification documents were typically handwritten on parchment, paper, or even wood. These materials, though readily available, were prone to damage, forgery, and deterioration over time. The 20th century ushered in an era of new materials and printing techniques. The development of durable plastics such as PVC, polyvinyl chloride, revolutionized the production of identification cards. Plastic cards were more resistant to wear and tear, less susceptible to moisture damage, and more difficult to counterfeit than their paper predecessors. The adoption of plastic cards coincided with advancements in printing technologies. Offset printing, which allowed for high-volume, high-quality printing, became the standard for producing identification cards. This enabled the incorporation of security features such as microprinting, holograms, and ultraviolet UV inks, making cards more difficult to forge. The shift from paper to plastic marked a significant improvement in the durability, security, and longevity of identification cards. It also paved the way for the incorporation of more sophisticated security features, as technology continued to advance in the latter half of the 20th century.